Hi guys, in this video I thought I'd share my esports story with you all, just so that you can get to know me a bit better. Yeah, I guess before I start, I'm still pretty new at recording videos, so it just feels like wherever I look at the lens just like looks awkward, so I'll probably just look at my monitor. Yeah, so anyways, I wouldn't really say I was a very popular nor decorated player in my career. But I did play for a very long time across many different teams, and I should have plenty of fun stories to share of my years in esports. So I guess a good place to start would be talking about how I got into League in the first place. I have always been someone who's stuck to playing a few games and getting really good at them. Little kid me was a billionaire in Neopets. I had my own clan in Territory War Online, top of the leaderboards in Transform Ice. Super good at a lot of games you just probably have never heard of. But here's some that you might have heard of. I was pretty good at Super Smash Brawl, and very good at Pokemon. Like if I was to compare how good I was at Pokemon to how good I am now at League, I would actually say it's comparable. So I was a rank 1 player in Pokemon, a fun fact that I love to share. Primarily playing Overused tier, which is the competitive format for singles. I never really liked doubles as it felt a bit gimmicky. I think at heart I am a strategy game player. In Pokemon, I felt like I could read like 5 to 6 turns ahead pretty reliably. I like theory crafting a lot. I came up with a lot of meta defining teams, as well as some off meta builds and picks that eventually defined the meta game that I played in. So I guess a good place to start would be to talk about my first esports tournament. So my first esports event was Revelations 2012. Can't believe that was almost 12 years ago. Feeling a bit old now. I was in high school at the time, but I was living at UCLA for a summer class that I was taking there. When I saw on the Smash forums, yeah, I know forums, that there was a tournament coming up in Santa Monica, which was close enough to where the campus was, which was Westwood. The problem was that it was a couple days after my class ended, so I wouldn't have housing anymore. So what I decided to do was I decided to sneakily stay an extra couple of days, and then I kept my dorm door bolted so I couldn't get locked out. Then late at night I would get back and I'd have to beg someone for the lobby to be like, oh, can you get me a guest pass, you know. And this was crazy for me at the time because I was pretty shy and typically someone who stuck to the rules. So this was a first for me. Like I was feeling super alive, like I was feeling like a rebel. And I was also super nervous since it was really the first time doing anything on my own. I was pretty sheltered growing up. Also, a big problem was that I did not have a smartphone. So I was just trying to navigate everything with a flip phone. And that was a challenge in itself. I remember on the bus right there, I ended up taking the wrong bus. And then I was like, where are we going? And then the driver was like, end of the line. And I was like, I look around and I'm in this like very sketchy neighborhood. I was super scared. There were just barred doors everywhere, graffiti. And I was like, luckily, I was able to find a Goodwill store. And I was like, please give me directions. And then, yeah, and then on the way back, I guess I didn't know that buses ended at a certain time. And so I missed the last bus as well. And the guy's like, just come in. I'll just drive you back. Empty bus and everything. So these are just like really good memories for me because it made me realize like how kind people could be. Well, another story was that a lady was asking me for bus money. She was like, yeah, I really have to visit my family. And I was like, oh, of course, yeah, like take my money. And then she just took it and walked off. And I was like, damn, but like it's fine because she probably needed the money. But I was like, also one story where people weren't so good, I guess. So it's been a while, so I don't remember the details too clearly, but I do remember how the event made me feel. It made me feel truly welcome and a part of the Smash community. When people heard it was my first tournament, they went out of my way to be friendly to me. I got to play friendlies with a lot of my favorite players that I knew from online, like M2K. I was able to get out of pools, but then lost early on in the bracket stage to some random Falco spamming lasers. I also noticed that there was a Pokemon part of the event, so I was like, oh, maybe I should check that out, like, you know, since I'm already here. So I walked up to them. I don't have a DS because when the DS came out, that's when I was able to get the SP because the SP went on sale. So I actually only played Pokemon on online simulators, so I couldn't compete. So when I walked over, everyone was kind of looking at me like, what's this guy doing here? And then when I said who I was, everyone was like, that's you? I was so shocked that they recognized my username. And immediately everyone was like asking for my help on polishing their teams for the tournament. They were like, oh, like, how can I improve my rain team and stuff like that? And in that moment, I just felt like my talent was recognized and valued. I was super happy because, I wasn't really that good of a student. So I wasn't feeling like too talented at all at that point. Low self-confidence. We always talk about like the glory days of esports. What does that mean? And I feel like this event was a perfect example of it for me. Everyone was there for the passion, and I mean, you had to be because the total prize pool for this international tournament was only $1,000, and people were flying in just for the chance to be able to pay off their trip, and count it as a vacation. Nowadays, I feel like everything is a lot more businessy. I know of some players who do play for the money, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just not the vibe for me. I will say my parents were very not supportive of gaming. Like, I won't go too in depth, but it was bad. Yeah. So anyways, still I only really thought of gaming as a hobby until I watched the season 2 world finals for League of Legends. Back then I didn't play, and the reason why I watched was because this was a pretty big deal for Taiwan. I'm a Taiwanese, and since it's a small country, any news of like a Taiwanese team doing well blows up. And so the Taipei Assassins won the season 2 world championships, and it was a really big deal. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's so hype, like maybe I could do this for a living. At the time I was also pretty frustrated because I just lost a Pokemon tournament to some really bad luck. Like, I got crit by Stone Edge 3 times. One Stone Edge 80% accuracy, so they couldn't even land it 3 times in a row, let alone like critting. I was just like, I'm no longer going to invest any more time into a game that I could lose based off just like having an unlucky day. So then I realized like maybe I should just get good at the most popular game, which at the time was League. So that's how I started playing League, I guess. I guess played a little bit before I went to college, but like level 5 or 10, like not really playing that much. But then I started playing more seriously in college, especially since I had 8 ping from UCLA. Since the servers were in Santa Monica, my internet at home was just super unstable. I played on a very cheap laptop. But when I went to college, I decided I wanted to buy my first gaming laptop, and I got it for very cheap. I got it from someone selling it on the college Facebook group. He was selling this like 2.5 thousand retail gaming laptop for only $400, and like obviously that's very sus. But I went to see him in person, and it worked fine. And I don't know really how he got a hold of it, and he kept saying like, oh, he just bought it and just didn't feel like using it anymore. And I was like, okay, I'll just buy it then. And it turned out to be a very good laptop. Like, it lasted me a very long time, but it was super heavy, so like I would be hurting my back carrying it to class every day. So eventually I just didn't go to class, and yeah, so I'm gonna blame the laptop for that. So I played maybe 2,000 to 3,000 ranked games in season 3. So I was gaming a lot in college. I hit Challenger in my very first season, and then I joined in my first amateur team as a mid laner. Our team sucked, so we really never amounted to anything. And eventually I realized like I just wasn't meant to be a mid laner. I was not that greedy, and back then like the mid laner was the main character. Like, you would take your team's Raptors and Wolves, enemy team's Raptors. You'd have 300 CS at 20 minutes. Like, that's just how mid lane was played back then. I would play more like, nowadays we would call it like a Doinby style, where you would like push and roam. But I noticed that even though I was down lots of gold, I was able to have even impact to the other mid laner, even when I had less items. So I was like, that would make sense for me to play support then, because I can do more with less, And also back then, crucially, there was no import rule. So people were just importing every role except support. Since the role wasn't even worth playing a plane ticket for, at least that's what people thought back then. So the first team I played support for was my collegiate team. We were actually pretty good. We had a team full of maybe Grandmaster Challenger equivalent players in modern day ELO. Fun fact, our ADC Rakin is actually now a big streamer in Brazil, and we both dropped out at the same time. Anyway, so we were good enough as a collegiate team to qualify for the LCS expansion tournament. This is the tournament in which LCS expanded from 8 to 10 teams, which is funny because right now it actually just shrunk back to 8. So I guess it went full circle. But anyways, our first match was against Team Coast. We ended up getting rolled. I actually had an exam that day, and then I had to take the exam, and then I had to run back to my dorm to play the match. I was super nervous. I was like out of breath, and then there was like 100 to 200,000 people watching on Twitch, which was mind-blowing because nowadays we don't even have the finals being that high. But yeah, the thing about me is I hate losing, and I just have some obsession with being at the top, feeling accomplished at something. I'm sure there's like some psychological reason for it, but just having that small taste of competition made me really want to continue. I'm going to get the timeline wrong maybe, but I think sometime after this, I get messaged by a support friend, Kangkwan, asking me if I wanted to join his team, Team Dragon Knights. I think someone from that team like boomed his mental, and then he wanted a replacement. I know their 80, Louis XGG, I think, was super toxic in solo queue. So already I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to play for it. And then, but the team itself was pretty good. Like their jungler Kez in particular, I remember thinking was a super good player. At that time, I was doing okay in school though, so I was unwilling to drop out of college just to play for, a team whose language I didn't even speak. Also, I remember someone mentioning that everyone in that team like smoked and a lot of the times indoors, so I was kind of worried about that too. So I actually recommended Smoothie to that team because he was a high master support at the time, and I really liked getting him in solo queues when I was filled. I know in the future I ended up regretting not taking this offer because they ended up qualifying for the LCS, and plus they had a really cool logo. So some history. So back in the day, there was a direct pathway from amateur to LCS. Your team could qualify for an open qualifier via the rank 5's ladder. Then if you won that tournament, you would get a spot in the Challenger Series. If you won the Challenger Series, then you would have a chance to relegate the bottom 2 LCS teams. So a lot of times you would get your friends or whoever you thought was good from solo queue, and you would make a team together to try to qualify. I think a team that qualified this way was actually Cloud9. So one of such teams that I did play for was called Escalate Legion Gaming. I know, like an absolutely terrible name. But we were actually pretty good. We lost almost none of our rank 5s games, but it was hard to get our schedules synced up to play. So the day before we have to qualify for the open qualifier, we still need to win one match, but our ADC for some reason like decided to sleep in or was busy, I don't remember, but couldn't make it. And so there was this weird feature where you could only really invite new people to the rank 5 team every certain amount of days. So we could not do that, so we had to have someone play on one of the accounts that were already on the team to qualify for the tournament. Now, I think ethically for me, for this decision, I personally think we're in the clear for this choice because anyone is allowed to play on the rank 5's ladder anyways. Literally, there were LCS players that would boost certain rank 5's teams to qualify. So I don't think it really mattered who played on the account. Since it wasn't an actual match, it was just a ladder. So I think we should have only been punished for account sharing and not really a competitive punishment. So anyways, I mean, you can probably guess where this is going. So what went down was the ADC briefly mentioned, the ADC filling for us mentioned to his friend, who was a manager for a different team, that, and back then managers were like super sus. They kind of just didn't do anything. And he pretty much ratted us out to try to get us DQ'd so his own team could win. They also lost, just thought I'd mention that. They were way worse than us. Our team actually had a chance to win. So because of this, we all got competitively banned for over half a year. You can look it up if you want to. It's the competitive ruling on June 2nd, 2015. After that, I was like super demoralized to continue at all. Like school wasn't going very well for me. Since I was playing League all the time, and I was just like, that was a super low point in my life. While we're on the topic of failing school, I mean, my parents had always told me that if I failed the class, like the college would just kick me out. But I actually failed many classes, and it turns out as long as you like keep a good communication with your counselor and talk about how you're going to change certain things, like usually they're willing to work with you. And I mean, it's important for them to have a good graduation rate. And worst case scenario, you just reapply back when you're ready. It's a quick readmission process for all students. And you know, they always say like C is passing, you know, F is fail, but they don't really specify what D is. And for some reason, D in my major just means like you can continue, I guess. So yeah, I always thought that was interesting. So later that year, I'm getting messaged by a couple teams looking to pick me up. I wasn't even sure if I was able to play because I was still competitively banned, but I was always one of the highest supports on the ladder at any given time. So I was often messaged by managers just looking top down on the ladder for their players. And so if you guys didn't know my generation of supports, so my generation of supports was Biofrost in Hakuo. Hakuo was actually the first of us to play in LCS. He played for Envy. And it was actually interesting because at that time, me and Biofrost were contracted challenger teams. So we wouldn't actually have had that opportunity. But Hakuo was very good. And I'm just saying. And then I also felt like esports contracts at that time were just completely fake because nobody ever really respected what was on the paper anyways. Biofrost ended up being the second of us to play in LCS with TSM after the tryouts. That's a story for later. One of the more interesting offers that I did get during this time period was Team Gates, started by Trick2G. The roster wasn't very promising, but Trick2G was really big back then, and it sounded like he really wanted me. So I was like pretty open to the idea. The house was going to be in Las Vegas, which would be a move for me. But I was still open to it, and then when it came down to negotiating, I was referred to his manager, and the manager just kept like nickel and diming me. Like I would just be like, oh, can I just get like an extra like $100 or $200 and I'd be down to play? She'd be like, no. I was like, because I was already getting a pretty significant pay cut compared to the other offers I was getting at the time. So eventually I just didn't feel very valued, and so I decided not to join the team. So then I got messaged by this manager called Neil Samatter, and so Neil was like, I'm going to put together this super team that's guaranteed to qualify into the Challenger Series. It was going to be me, support, and then he was going to import a really good ADC. I forget who it was, but I remember it was someone that I thought was a good player. And then he was going to import the rank 1 OS player, Schönfire. And then we would get Chorong for top, nowadays known as Anda. And for mid, we would get Peck and Wolf. So these were two really highly ranked soul laners from solo queue. So to me, the roster sounded really good to me. He was promising all sorts of things like high salary, big sponsors, private one-on-one coaching, you know, a really nice gaming house. So I was like, oh yeah, of course I'll play. Anyways, what we learned later on is that this dude is actually a serial liar, and that he was lying about literally everything to everyone. But through this web of lies, he was actually able to get us all to play together. And in the end, it actually kind of worked out. So what happens is we don't actually get the ADC that he mentioned before. We get Double G, who was from, I believe, Lithuania, who wasn't bad at all. All I remember about Double G is that I would play Janna, I would shield him in lane for a trade, and then he would be like, do not, he's like, why are you shielding me? Like, shield yourself in the trade, in his thick accent. So I always remember that, like it stuck in my head. So I'll be like, okay, so then obviously I'm open-minded, like I will shield myself and auto them in the trade instead. And then I go to my next team, and my next team ADC is like, so why are you shielding yourself in every trade? Like, why don't you just shield me? And I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah, that does make sense as well. So then it was just like, I was just like so confused on how to play Janna at that moment in time. But anyways, so Neil gets all of the team except me and Anda to fly into his gaming house in Ohio, I believe, which turns out to be a small apartment. This is just how I remember the story because I actually was not there. I was just playing for my dorm. It's probably better to ask Peckenwolf. Peckenwolf was on that team. He actually flew there. Yeah, my gut was telling me no, so I was like, Anyways, so I don't think they had enough PCs, so then Pekin had to play from like the public library or like computer room there on one of the PCs there, but the internet was so bad it was like unplayable for him, so we never really got to scrim. And then we always had to play with the substitute mid laner even in our matches. So our first couple of matches we played with CY Xydra, who was like this like high on the ladder jungler. He was super secretive, like he would never join comms, and he would I think he gave us like a fake name and everything like that. So him and Surefire would alternate between mid and jungle depending on what champions were up. So Surefire could only play Ryze, and then CY Zydra could only play Zed. So whichever one was open, we'd just have them go mid, and then both of them were good at Nidalee. So if anyone did any amount of scouting and banned Zed, Ryze, Nidalee, we would have instantly lost from draft. But they didn't, so we managed to get to the finals. And I will say, Surefire was definitely ahead of the competition at that time. Like, he was super good at jungle tracking, which nowadays every jungler is expected to know, but back then it was like a rare talent. So for the finals, we wanted everyone to go West Coast because the servers were in Santa Monica, and we wanted people to play on low ping. At the time, there was a place called Esports Arena that just opened in Irvine. And I believe Neil lied to them and was like, oh, you would get something in exchange for hosting our players at your LAN center. And at the same time, he also told some random team like Astral Authority or something that they were our sponsor. So that was weird. And then, so meanwhile, I think the situation at Ohio was going crazy. Like there was a fight between the players and Neil that led them having to get the police to help them get their stuff from the apartment to get over to California. So while those players played from Esports Arena, I played from my dorm and a fluent from Canada to play at the C9 house since he's cousins with Balls. And in that series, I played the first competitive games of Poppy support in that series. She just got reworked, so nobody knew what she did. And she was super OP and overtuned as well. Like, so what happened was enemy ADC was playing Tristana and he kept jumping into my Poppy W. And back then, Poppy's Snapcast ulti, if you just press ulti, it like knocked them up like 2 or 3 seconds. It was like a Malphite knockup. Also, nobody really knew the creative plays you could make with the ulti, like zoning from turrets, using it to flip objectives. So we ended up winning. I remember, and it was like, oh, I first time flew in game 5. I was like, oh, okay, well, at least we won. And then for that series, we played with a sub mid laner called Jimmy Talon from solo queue. Pretty fresh. I think he got some coaching from Pekin, and like he randomly popped off that game that day. Like he solo killed Slushy a couple times, and I remember they were like accusing us of like cheating because like he was playing so well. They were like, it couldn't have been him, you know. And during one of the games, like I just remember I had to pause, like because both my arms just went numb. I was so nervous, like I couldn't feel my hands. I think winning this series was like one of the happiest moments of my life. Like I felt like I finally made it. Like my efforts weren't in vain. Like I think most players will say that their first important win feels like one of the best, and this is definitely the case for me as well. So yeah, after the hype of winning the match settled down, the next step was getting someone to sponsor the team so we could house the players that were here. They didn't have a home, so Challenger Series spots were valuable and were pretty wanted because the spot itself was worth about 100k at the time if you want to buy in. And people would treat it as an investment because you could spend 100k for the spot and possibly promote it to the LCS and sell it for 1 to 2 million, you know, the LCS spot, I mean. In fact, a lot of Challenger Series players were actually getting paid more than LCS players because you had to only pay them for a couple months for a chance to promote, and you have a chance to get a lot of return back. I think a lot of the players were desperate to find housing, so they took a deal with Dream Team, who would house them quickly in the middle of nowhere. I heard they got like signing bonuses and stuff for giving over the spot. I actually got no money for that transaction, even though I played in all the matches from start to finish and had to deal with all that. But and I was just happy that we won and that everyone's going to be okay. Around the same time as these negotiations, I was actually being reached out to by another team called Ember. I was recommended by Contrix, who was on the team at the time. This is random, but I guess I feel I should mention this. At the time, all esports communication was done completely on Skype. So if you had like a friend request on Skype or anything like that, you were just like, oh my god, like a team offer, like you'd get so excited, you know. Anyways, so Ember was having some issues with their support at the time. I'm not going to go too in depth here, but apparently some very crazy stuff was said and done. So they were holding tryouts for replacements. They were operating out of a WeWork in Santa Monica. It's like a communal office space. It was relatively close to my college, UCLA. So they called me an Uber. I mean, since I saw the flip phone, right, to go try out in person, and eventually reached out to me with the offer saying that was their top choice. And I think me being able to go in person really helped me out. Also, apparently the other person trying out like kind of flopped a bit. Like apparently he would like count his spells from like 8 to 0 every time. So I thought that was funny. So I told my old team that I would probably take this offer since it was better, and I recommended to them Biofrost, who was a friend of mine's, online friend of mine's. So honestly, dropping out of college was one of the scariest decisions of my life for me. I remember I came back from the tryouts telling my Uber driver, I'm like, I think I really might have a chance to play like games for a living. Do you think I should do that or continue with college, you know? And he was like, if I had a choice to play games for a living, like I would choose that every time. And I was like, damn, like facts. So I was like, okay. I mean, like I grew up my whole life having the idea instilled into me that college education was the most important thing you could have for a successful future. So I told my counselor I was going to take a break. I gave her a real reason, or I gave her the real reason, and then appealed for my housing money back in front of a board. And I was just like, yo guys, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, I don't want to miss it. And they were like, okay, you can have your money back. So this, I guess, starts my Ember chapter, and Ember is my favorite team that I've ever played for. Yeah. It felt like everyone was fully invested. It was a team that really aspired to be more than it was. So our CEO was John Pan, our GM was Bao Lam. Both of them quit their jobs at Riot to work on this team. There's actually a documentary of this team on YouTube. It's called At All Costs. If you're curious about this team, definitely watch it. The videographer from this team actually went on to start a YouTube channel called Lessons from the Screenplay, which is pretty popular. So yeah, small world if you've watched that channel at all. I haven't watched it myself because it's kind of hard for me to watch myself on camera. Like I actually haven't watched any of my team documentaries. So where do I start? So Ember was funded by this like low-key billionaire, like as in he was low-key. He gave, I believe, $1 or $2 million to the team to be spent over the course of a year to try twice to promote to LCS. I think we ended up overspending by quite a bit, which is why the team shut down after one split. Mainly because all of us felt high confidence in promoting the first time around. I think eventually we moved from WeWork because our neighbors were complaining about our noise levels while we were doing comms. So we ended up moving to a really nice office space close to Riot Games campus. I think our neighbors were like Yahoo, and across the street is like Red Bull, so it definitely wasn't cheap. I always tell people that Ember was ahead of its time because I feel like we were. So Ember's motto was better humans become better athletes, and it was also built around fostering NA talent. They were one of the first teams to pay actual living wages to players, but at the time people thought the salaries were crazy, you know. So I was personally getting paid like around 4 to 5K a month. We lived in a cute little rundown house next to Venice Beach, a very old house, like strange paintings everywhere. We would have a personal trainer that had us doing like hardcore exercises. Like he was badass. Like he would like do like tire flipping and all that, ropes. And we would also have like a specialized yoga person come to us very early in the mornings. And she was very interesting too. We actually have a yoga series on YouTube if you're curious about her. Actually, let me see if I can find it right now. Yoga series. Wait, can you see this? Let me see. Oh, you can. Yeah, okay. If you're curious about how she was like, you can definitely check out these videos. They're so funny. She would always talk about opening up the third eye and like, oh, there's me. yeah, like Ember had like a crazy monetization plan. They were like, yeah, we're gonna sell these yoga videos and yada yada yada. Like, I love that team. Anyways, we also had a strategic coach, and we also had a sports psychologist in Weldon, who you guys may know. I know he's controversial, but I personally thought he was very helpful in introducing concepts and ideas and practice methods that we might not have thought of before. Through him, I learned a lot about how to interact with teammates. And I will say the in-game stuff was a little bit questionable, but yeah, it's fine. And there is one thing I remember. I remember he would tell us like the enemy team was like the enemy, like we shouldn't even acknowledge them when we walk past them. So we'd be walking past people in the hallway, and we'd be like, and they'd be like, hi, and we'd be like, we'd just keep walking. Like, that part was hilarious. But anyways, what else do I have? We had a personal chef. So when we first tried out this personal chef, he came with like a huge feast, like whole table, everything tasted good, like salad, meat, whatever. We're like, okay, yeah, get this guy, like he's a good chef. And then with each passing day after he got hired, there was less food, less quality. It just kept getting worse, until finally we got a breaking point where he's delivering the food he made to our WeWork, right, our office. And he's like, oh, today's meal is ratatouille, guys. And what comes out is this small container of like a couple limp pieces of vegetables. And I kid you not, for like 6 of us, a small container, like 1 spoonful of bacon. And so we like were sus. So we did an investigation, and we were pretty sure he was using his stipend to buy his own groceries. And so, yeah, so then he had to go, and then we just ended up paying for our own food. And we also had like a Soylent phase, since we were sponsored by Soylent for some reason. And all of us got like really nasty stomach aches from Soylent. So then we just kind of stopped. It just tastes like oil. So anyways, about the actual team. Our team was doing really well in scrims. Did I even talk about the roster? Yeah, so it's me, solo top. Our jungler was Contrax, but Contrax was 16. So he couldn't play in the playoffs. So eventually we had to import Centaurin. And then our mid laner was Golden Glue and ADC Lot. So our team was doing well in scrims. We would consistently have positive records against top LCS teams. Like, and I'm not even kidding, like really positive records against top LCS teams. So since we couldn't use one, we imported Centaurin from EU. I remember he was on like a very predatory contract from Huma at the time. It was really hard to get them to let him go. And then I think we ended up having to like pay some exorbitant buyout. But I'm so glad that we ended up getting him, because he is one of my favorite teammates ever. So kind and so hardworking and so talented. I mean, Juan was contracts also very, very good as well. But he was, obviously couldn't play. So one day I went to the WeWork office. We've just finished our first block of scrims, and then I'm going out to get lunch. And then I round the corner, and guess who's there? Literally my mom. I don't know how she found me to this day, because I didn't even tell them I had dropped out yet at that time. Like, and she's just like, oh, I don't even remember what she said. I just remember being super shocked. And I think back to it, I'm like, how did she know? And I think when I peeled back for my money from housing, I think the return check went back home. And then that's what got my parents suspicious. And yeah, I still have no idea how she found me though. So our big playoffs match comes around, and we lose. Yeah, we lose to TDK in what I think is the biggest choke of my entire career. Like, not me, but just like as a team. I think we had a super bad meta read. It was a tank meta, like with Sunfire, Iceborne, and the enemy team would pick Nautilus mid, and we just would not have enough damage to kill both their tanks. And we got super panicked that day. Like, we weren't able to adapt to the draft at all. We kept picking the same stuff that we were doing well with in scrims instead of adapting to, what was in our face. And we were like panic picking like stuff we never played before too, like Morgana mid. We're just like, no, it's mid, like what do we do, like it can't be good. And then anyways, so apparently the billionaire guy had invited his billionaire friends to come watch the match, and like invest in the team, and I imagine it must have been so embarrassing for him to watch that. So I just remember, like, at the end of it all, I have a voicemail on my flip phone from the billionaire, like I think a day or two after the match, like something along the lines of like, hi, like I'm calling for my vacation in like private island, like just want to let you know I saw the matches and I'm sorry you guys lost, or something like that. Oh god, like I don't remember, but I think one of these days I'm going to charge up that phone and just listen to it, just for good time's sake. And at some point in time, around this time, I also got to play my first LCS game. I was subbing in for Echo Fox. The GM forgot my equipment, so I had to play with whatever equipment was available from their locker. So pretty much I had to play with a new mouse and keyboard. The mouse I was able to get used to fine, but the keyboard was a problem because it was a numpad keyboard and I played with no numpad. So I constantly had to look at the keyboard, like while I was playing. I was just like, Q, to make sure I was pressing the right keys. And the crazy part was we almost won anyways. Like I think it came down to my Poppy E not hitting someone against the wall, barely. And so, yeah, not like the dream debut, but I'm just happy I got to play. So for a bit we were just also got to meet Rick Fox. That was a big deal. Because he was super cool. So I think for a bit after we lost on Ember, we were just like in the office. We were living off corn dogs. Like we were all like budgeting extremely. We weren't sure like what was going to happen with the team. And then at some point during this time, I did try out for TSM, which was like everyone's dream team at the time because they were super popular. They were replacing Yellow Star. So my tryout was 2 duo games with Doublelift, one without comms and one with comms. And mind you, this is at a time where there's flex queue, so people are out there queued as 5 people. So the first game without comms, we got like crazy stomped. I think we got Dovebot super early. It was unplayable. So I think the first game was so tilting that he never joined the call for the second game. So I was just in the call by myself in raid call, I believe. And I was like, oh, this is so doomed. But at that time, it was like so doomed. I was just like, whatever, like, haha. And then I think Biofrost also tried out this time, and they liked him enough to where they flew him out to Korea. And I think it was good because I think him and Doublelift were actually a very good match for each other, especially personality-wise. So I'm happy for them. And then during this time, Envy picked up Lot for LCS as well. So Team Liquid, and the reason why I mentioned this is because he won't be with us for this next team. So Team Liquid reaches out to us and wants our core from Ember for their academy team. TL was paying significantly less money than some of the other offers we were separately getting, but we decided to take the pay cut to try again together because we thought we were capable and we just choked on the day. So the caveat is that if we promoted to LCS, we would get a big share of the sell value for the spot. So we were confident we would promote, which is why we took the deal. Team Liquid is known for having a lot of money now, but back then they were actually on a pretty small budget. In fact, a lot of the potential investors were visiting us while we were screaming. They're like, hi, we're from like Golden State Warriors. And then I was like, oh, so they're gonna have the money next year. Honestly, it was pretty bad. Like apparently our food budget per player was like $2. So we would be having like homemade spaghetti or like Loco Moco. We often had to supplement our meals with Quest bars since we were sponsored by them. But we eventually got really tired of those. I think like there was one flavor I liked and that was about it. So initially our roster was going to be solo top. Our jungle was supposed to be Beast. So Beast was this Korean jungler that was killing it in the main team scrims in Korea, and they were going to eventually have him play like 1 year in academy or something and then promote later. And then our mid was Golden Glue, 80 Fabi. You guys might know him as the Gatekeeper, and I would be playing as support. However, when Beast was entering the country, he, I believe, put that he was here for work, but I think you were supposed to, I don't think his visa was ready, so I think he was supposed to say that he was here for sightseeing or something. I mean, back then we didn't really follow the rules. So anyways, so then they sent him back to Korea, and I don't think he was allowed to re-enter for a long time. So we ended up getting Moon, who was also very good. So we were a good team, but eventually there was a drama leading to our team having to split up. So if you're curious more about this, you can watch Breaking Point, the documentary on YouTube. That was from our time on Team Liquid. But pretty much, I think there were some big arguments on the main team that eventually led to Moon getting promoted for a bit, and then Dardoch was playing with us for a bit. And I will say, Dardoch was very friendly during his time with us. And then Dardoch went back up, and then Piglet came down, and then Fabi went up, and then there was also like temporary scrim sets where like Piglet and Fabi were splitting time, and then it was permanent. Piglet officially on our team. Piglet was just coming off like a world championship, so he was like very on form. In comms, he was like more on the quiet side, but he was a very mechanical player. The issue was, since he was so dominant, the enemy team would always swap away from us. So this was at a time where he could just like swap lanes at level 1 and completely avoid the laning phase, and then both sides just trade the first turret. So we never really got to play out lane in actual matches. And yes, this is the split of the infamous Rammus support lock-in. So I'll just give you guys the full scoop. So yes, Piglet did lock in support Rammus, but it was not his fault at all. He was having audio issues and then got one of the Riot people to come fix it. But when they were fixing it, they changed the client from Korean to English to fix it, but never changed it back to Korean. So when Piglet was typing out the actual pick in champ select, which was Soraka actually, he was typing in Korean. It came out in gibberish, and so he just had to log in the first thing he saw. We immediately informed the referees that was a mistake, but they said nope, you just have to play it out. So, which is crazy, because after I looked at the competitive rules handbook and it said if there's a mistake in champion select and it's immediately identified, it should get remade. So yeah, in a super important game 5, we decided to give me the Rammus because jungle was just more OP than support at that time. So we let Moon have an actual jungler, and I kind of just like rolled around in circles all game, and we lost. It was devastating. I think like nobody said a word for days. It was like pure silence, like so ominous. I totally forgot to mention this, but it was during this time that I also got my very first smartphone. Yeah, thank you HTC, which is why like the pictures you see here actually start on Dignitas because yeah, I did not have a smartphone before then. So so after these sad Challenger Series experiences, I felt like no matter what I wanted to do was just take an LCS opportunity, the first one I could get, like just get my foot in the door. So Dignitas reaches out to me in the off season. They just hired 2 new Korean coaches and wanted to pick me up as a trainee, I guess. It's like a Korean thing. So I asked about the pay, and I kid you not, it is $100 a month. So the owners are, I believe, like these successful piano resellers, but esports was their side gig. They were behind teams like Coast, Apex, and Dignitas, right? But I just wanted to, you know, touch LCS with a finger, you know, like just lick it once with my tongue. I just wanted to taste it a little bit. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever, I'll move in. So the house is all right, but it's in the most sketch neighborhood, Signal Hill in Long Beach. I just looked it up, and it is actually currently one of the highest crime rates in the country. So when Someday and Chaser first moved in, and this was when Pokemon Go first came out, and it was like bussin', and so after scrims late at night, they're like, oh, everyone, let's go outside and catch some Pokemon. I was like, no, no, don't go out, it's not safe. And they're like, huh? Not safe? Like, you can literally hear gunshots late at night. Like, they had me sleeping in a baby crib in the living room. I actually have a picture right here. That's my crib. Okay, I mean, it's a crib. Anyways, so where was I? Above me was like a ceiling window that would like blast light into my eyes at 6 in the morning every day. And I remember one of our team breakfasts before our match was McDonald's. So I guess that was like the vibe. And then, but it was fine. You know, I learned a decent amount from Coach Kim, who just came from winning the World Championship with Samsung Galaxy. And I think he has a pretty storied career now. But at the time, I don't think he was getting along with our NA players, especially. And I think it didn't help that our translator was also mistranslating a lot of the stuff that was being said. So eventually, we ended up getting Cop and St. Vicious as our coaches. Back then, LCS was a best of 3, so when Dig was struggling a bit, I got the opportunity to play a couple of series. People were more willing to put in a sub for like game 1, and then if it went badly, then put in the starter for game 2. It is a bit awkward, between the players when that happens. But me and Nick Special got along quite well. I actually saw him recently at TwitchCon, and he's doing great. I think he just graduated college. Anyways, I guess I performed well enough in my games where I was approached by Phoenix1, a team that was actually doing quite well, but apparently they were having support issues. I know. I feel like a lot of my opportunities were kind of from like other teams having support issues, but you take what you can get. Back then there was a lot of nepotism, so it was really hard to get picked up as a high elo solo queue support, even over someone who's like in D2, famously like Elements. It was pretty urgent, I think, because the negotiations happened really quickly. Like they were like, we'll give you double your current salary. And I was like, so $200? They're like, yeah. I was like, okay, at least 1K, like come on now. And then that was like the first time I put my foot down in a negotiation. Like, you can't be serious, like $200 to play LCS? Like, isn't there supposed to be a minimum? Anyways, so they said, yeah, okay, sure. And then I moved in the same day. The other support moved out. The same day the other support moved out. And, I could tell there was drama because I would like lock in a champion. They're like, oh, so we can play this champion now. Or I would like roam from my lane and they'd be like, oh, so supports can leave lane? And I was like, oop, like what is going on here? P1 was nice though. We were treated really well. The gaming house was super nice for its time. It's in a safe residential area. I don't know if you guys know Granada Hills. It was a big house, it's a separate scrim area from living area, which was pretty rare to have. So I guess you get that kind of like separation of work and like life, I guess, which is nice. And the chef, Bosuk, was super good. Let me see if I have any pictures. Okay, so this is Dig food. I didn't show this to you guys. This is like on a good day. Actually, eventually, I believe the chef did not get paid. So she was like really angry, and she like one day just came in, stormed in, opened the refrigerator, took all the stuff out, and then left. Like as she should. And then this is P1 food. So I want to talk about the food now. So he was super good. The only issue is he only knew how to cook comfort food. So like very oily food coma type food. As you can see, our pork belly wraps were like almost every day. But I think a lot of the people on the team were trying to lose weight. Well, we say lose weight, but in actuality, we were actually eating like 5 meals a day. We would have breakfast, brunch, lunch, stacks, dinner, post-dinner, LCK watch party food, McDonald's delivery. We would literally eat every possible meal of the day. And you bet I made sure to eat my money's worth because of what I was getting paid. Here's the example. So here, I think I have a picture actually. We go out to the restaurant one day after we win, and the owner asked me, oh, do I like oysters? I was like, oh yeah, I like oysters. He's like, okay, 4 oysters, please. And I thought he ordered like 4 oysters and like maybe like 2 for each of us. But no, what came out was 4 whole platters of oysters. And we finished them all, of course, but like, yeah. And then we also had a pet cat that would only ever sleep on my bed. I think apparently it was like raised on this bed or something. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So this is them. Rengar, of course. Like if you're on a league team, like your cat is either named Rengar or Yumi, no exceptions. Yumi wasn't even out back then, so it just had to be named Rengar. Yeah, and then this is him doing the same thing, but at 2 a.m. when I'm trying to sleep. Yeah, anyways, when I first joined the team, I think I scrimmed for maybe like 1 or 2 days, and then it was already like match day, so it was fast. But our games went super smoothly. I think Arrow and Ryu were 2 of the best imports at that time. It felt like anything we did went well. We went on an 8-game winning streak into playoffs, and we were considered one of the strongest teams. But behind the scenes, we definitely had like a weird situation. Like we were splitting jungle time between Inori and Meteos, but we rarely got to scrim with Meteos. But we played many stage matches with him. And towards the end of regular split, they moved in another support as well called Shady from Collegiate. They had actually already assigned him at the same time as me, but he never got to move in until now. So even though we were doing well, I think the coach wanted to give him a fair chance to try out, which I think was fine. He started out with 50% of the scrim time, and he primarily liked to play carry supports like Brandon Bilkos, but then he started to get more of the scrim time since they were planning to try him out in a stage match. And without going into too much detail, eventually I had an argument with the coach where I was like, oh, you know, if I'm going to be the one playing playoffs, I would like to get more scrim time. And that argument did not go well. I eventually went to no scrim time, and they didn't even let me go to like one of the matches at one point. So yeah, it did not go well. So I look back and I think to myself, like, you know, I probably should not have like spoken up, I guess, because I think a big difference between Korean coaches and NA coaches is that Korean coaches demand a lot of respect, like ultimate respect and authority. And talking back is like one of the worst things you can do, especially against one of their decisions. This was also back in a time where LCK would sub in players in and out a lot, like T1 did. And I think nowadays people realize that that's actually pretty hurtful for the team atmosphere, because it does shatter trust between teammates. Yeah, so I think a lot of people are curious about what happened with me towards the end of P1, so I thought I would clarify. P1 still exists today, actually. They are now known as Sentinels. Also, another interesting thing is they did ask me for a jungle recommendation before I left, and I recommended one of my old teammates, ZY Zydro from, you guys remember, the sub jungler from the Open Qualifier team. You guys might know him today as Mike Young. Yeah, so very interesting that did happen. So the next team I went to was Immortals. Funnily enough, actually, they ended up getting rid of Busuk because they want healthier food. So they got a nice like chef that could cook vegan stuff. And so Busuk ended up going to Immortals, who was looking for a chef, which was funny. So we both went to Immortals. I will say I think chef is not an unimportant part of the team. Like, if you look at NRG, they literally have a 1v9 chef, and they won the championship with a pretty big upset. So I feel like good food equals happy players equals better gameplay is definitely possible. But and I will say Busuk has a pretty good win rate. Like, he had a good win rate on P1, and then like moving into Immortals, also a good win rate. So anyways, there were whispers of an academy system coming up, and Immortals was like, we can promise that you'll start for that when it comes. Plus, you can have a very nice salary for remaining as a sub. So this was like a very comfortable time in my life. The Immortals house, super nice. Oh, and this is just like more pictures of us eating food every day on P1. You can see like the scope of the meal. Very nice. Very happy with that. Yeah, so I guess Immortals, like, to me, it was a very comfortable time. So here's some comfortable pictures, like us in Malibu. Yeah, us getting hot pot, you know, traveling the world. So pretty much that was super nice. It was like a very grand house in a very nice neighborhood in LA, Brentwood. I think my only issue with the living was my roommate was Flame, and his skincare routine would take like an hour. So he has really nice skin. So I always had to wait a long time to use the shower. Actually, funny story about this house is actually apparently after Team stopped using it. So after Immortals, Golden Guardians used that house, and then apparently they started using it for adult films. Like, one of my ex-teammates stumbled upon one and like mentioned it, and I was like, oh, interesting. Wasn't my room though. Anyways, so I used this time to hold 3 accounts, top 10, but also to learn more about myself and kind of explore life a little bit. Also, Ole was like the exact opposite of me as a support at that time, so I learned a lot from him. He's like very much an impulsive, mechanical player, really knows his when he get engaged. So that was kind of what I felt I was missing in my own gameplay. So it was very nice to be able to learn from him, and I was also able to kind of teach him my style a bit, like my more conservative style. Immortals ended up making a miracle run to Worlds, and I was just there, you know, enjoying the company, traveling around the world. You know, we went to Boston for finals. I think this picture is from Boston. And then after that, yeah, I love Boston. You know, it's super lovely, super walkable, and lots of culture. And then we went to Korea for boot camp, and that was my first time playing Korean solo queue. I got ranked 12, so I was the highest support on the ladder during a time when a lot of Worlds players were boot camping there, so that made me like pretty raised my self-confidence. And then admittedly though, it was the ardent center meta, so support was very strong at that time. And I also got to try some of the Chinese super server as well. They just don't care about meta as much there, I feel like, and they just play assassins and try to one-shot you permanently. Oh, actually, there's a funny story. So when we were in China, we were on the airplane, and Xminty, I guess, was like scrolling through Facebook on his phone, and Facebook is banned in China. So the person sitting next to him was, I think, a Chinese citizen. So he reported Xminty to the flight attendant, and then they detained him on the flight because we all got off the flight and we're like, where's Xminty? And so they detained him, and then I speak Chinese, so I was like, okay, I'll go ask about like where he is. He's like, oh, your friend, like we have him. I was like, okay, well, I was like, we need him because we need to catch our next flight. And then he's like, oh, like your friend did a bad thing. I was like, huh? And then I was just like, oh, like I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but we eventually got him. Like we got to meet him later on, and then yeah, so that was a very scary moment. Like I was very worried at that time. Our hotel in China was like super fancy. It was a 5-star intercontinental hotel. Hotel buffet was like all you can eat lobster tails. And at the beginning, everyone was like eating them off cooldown. They were like, wow, lobster tails. But I think by the end, everyone was so tired of them. You would see them bring out the lobster tails, and then they would just be left out to dry. Nobody would even give it a single look. Like, so anyways, the important part is that when we were in China, we saw the team owners. So this is the Boston Stadium. And then Korea boot camp. I mainly take pictures of food. I'm guilty. One of our sponsors, Bloody Gaming. The Chinese stadium in Wuhan. So yeah, so we saw the team owners having a meeting, and then suddenly rumors started going around like, oh, Immortals is going to get rejected from LCS franchising, which is crazy because they were at Worlds, you know, they had such a good brand at that time. You know, nowadays obviously they're under a different ownership. And if you're curious about my time on Immortals, definitely you can see it on the YouTube channel in the older videos. There are some videos of our team. So yeah, so Immortals did end up getting rejected from LCS. So now I have to find another team, right? So I can't do the academy team thing anymore. So a big thing is that this contract had a very high buyout, which was a pretty common way for teams to recoup their money back then. Since it was hard to find, or what's called, like teams would often put a really high buyout when they sign a player and then like make back all their money that they had to pay the player. And it worked. Like other teams would just like buy out the contract and buy out the contract. I don't know. I guess the money's going in a circle or something. So it was hard to find a team to pick me up. The GM for Immortals was Nick, and he was also my GM on Team Liquid, and now was heading over to FlyQuest now. So he decided to pick up me and Anda, who are the subs on Immortals, and we would be starting in LCS. He also got Flame and Fly for solo lanes, and Turtle for ADC with Rapid Star as the coach. Even though I played a decent amount of LCS already, this was actually the first split where I was the team's intended starter. And that was a really big deal for me. So in theory, I thought this roster was really good with lots of individual talent. I remember a lot of people were power ranking us very highly. During this time, I was also rank 1 on the ladder. The first thing we did was a Korean bootcamp. Since our coach was Rapid Star, we were able to get scrims with actual LCK teams like Africa Freaks, and I remember our records being alright against them, as well as being like good against other LCS teams. Unfortunately, Fly's visa was delayed, so he missed the first couple weeks of LCS, which we played with Keen, and we were actually doing alright. But then a Fly arrived, and we still weren't ramping up. We were very much a scrim team. We had very good scrim results, but we weren't able to translate to stage. So then roster changes started to happen. I think a lot of us were getting swapped up and down between Academy and LCS. And for the first and last time in my career, I actually did not make playoffs. Actually, I forgot to talk about the chef tryouts. So on this team, we did tryouts for the chefs. Like we had a bunch of different chefs come in A lot of them no-showed, but the ones that did come in kind of like presented their food. They're like, this is our food. And yeah, and then we would vote on like who we would want as our chef. So this couple in particular, they ended up being the chefs for TSM after we didn't take them. I was like, their food is so good because they actually own a restaurant in Koreatown. And so I was like, oh, we need to get them. We're literally getting restaurant grade food. But there was also like other people voting, like the staff were voting as well. And the staff were voting for the other chef, who was very friendly, but her food was very much like more homey. Like anyways, she would cook like so we ended up choosing her. She would cook, she would go to like the Korean market and she would get the pre-made prepackaged vegetables for like bibimbap, and then like, so our meals would be like rice with the vegetables and then like miso soup for most of the days. That was almost our meal every day actually. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed we didn't choose this, but it's fine. Anyways, so in the off season, many of us were dropped. So once again, found myself having to change teams again. At this point, it felt like every half year I was having to negotiate with teams and move and acclimate to a new environment. And I was just getting really exhausted at this point. I was also getting like severe doubt in myself and felt like at this point, like I might be the problem. You know, I would always do some introspection after every team. And I think after this team, I was like, okay, I definitely can do a better job accepting criticism. There's always more things you can do to be a better teammate, both inside and outside the game. So anyways, I get reached out to play for another academy team, this time for a new organization. They're called Wonder Thieves. The coach, Joe, was actually someone who I declined to play on a few of his teams before. So I'm grateful that he was still willing to work with me. I made a big point in telling them that I wanted to be on a team that wanted me for the long term. So this roster was an interesting one. This was at a time where people were just stacking their academy rosters to the brim with talent to be like more of a reserve roster for the LCS teams. LCS was reaching some of its peak spending at this time, and so academy was being compensated very well. I heard even some players getting 6 figures. So our roster at this time was Brandini, who had LCS experience. And then we were importing Levi, who was like the superstar jungler from Vietnam. Linsanity, a solo queue mid talent, and then Rikara for ADC. Rikara had actually been in the scene for about the same time as me, and was one of the top AC prospects at that time. So we were pretty stacked. I don't have too much to say about this team. I will say Levi was feeling a bit homesick, so I took him to apparently one of our most authentic pho places in Little Saigon. It's called Fusso One. I think I have pictures. Look at the face he's giving him. He's like, what kind of pho are you serving me over here? And then yeah, he was like, oh, this is so mid. And I was like, oh wow, really? I liked Levi a lot. I thought he was super talented, one of the best teammates you could ask for. He learned English super fast. We still keep in touch actually. I saw him recently at Worlds. We ended up losing in playoffs pretty early. I remember I was playing the final game of the series and we're grouping for a fight, and then I just see the smallest Cho'Gath like hobble over to group, and I was just like, oh. I got some feeling that we were going to lose after that. I don't know why. That's just it's a core memory for me. Like I just remember the small baby Cho'Gath hobbling over. I was like, oh no. It's so cute. Interestingly enough, the house was the same as the old P1 house. So I was getting crazy deja vu the whole time. If you're curious about more on this team, it's recorded in a series on YouTube called What's Not Given. I play the piano in the intro. It's like pretty dope. Yeah, so definitely if you're curious, you can check it out. So next split, Wonder T tries something completely different with their academy team. They fill it with rookies from scouting grounds. This is a picture of Wonder T in like the very beginning days. Everyone looks so young. Yeah, so they try something different. They end up keeping me around to mentor the players, as well as picking up Kelsey Moser as the coach, who is well known as an analyst and writer. So this team was super green. It was Fake Out top, Fragis jungle, Soligo mid, and Prismo as ADC. You might recognize some of these names because they went on to play LCS later. So a lot of my, okay, so these are some pictures of like Soligo and Fake God. eating watermelon popsicles. So on a lot of my older teams, I was often less experienced than those on my teams. So I tried to play more of a role as a follower and learner, though I still gave my input when it came to shot calling. But now that I've had a couple of years of experience, I definitely felt like I could be a team leader and give my advice on what has worked for my teams in the past, both in and out of game. At this point in my career, I've also worked with all sorts of teammates, NA coaches, Korean coaches, multiple sports psychologists. I definitely felt comfortable in giving advice that I knew would help them out in the long run, as well as helping to facilitate reviews. Kelsey was also super good, super hardworking coach. And a big thing is she cared a lot about each player. So I was very happy with how this split went overall. The expectation was not to win, though, I mean, obviously still that was my goal, but I'm just glad everyone was able to show lots of improvement. I think I even got to play with Bang for a bit. I don't remember why, but yeah, that was awesome since he was like the second world champion I got to play with after Piglet, and I guess my third Korean ADC. I guess Arrow was like an LCK MVP, right? So I kind of just, collected them all. When he first came to NA, his form was like definitely elite caliber. Like, wow, he was really good. I think a core memory from this team is our very first scrim. Fake God is playing Jay's top versus some melee champion, and he's just trading farm on the first wave. And I'm like, Aaron, I'm pretty sure like all my other top laners that play this matchup walk into the bush and then harass them with Qs and autos. And then I was like, oh, this is gonna be a long split, isn't it? Like, but yeah, I mean, he is a fast learner. He's very talented. And another thing was during the season, I think this was when teams started to prioritize players getting their own apartments for more privacy, rather than gaming houses. I will say my personal opinion is that gaming houses is probably better for being a better team, but eventually the privacy is more important and separation of work life and office life, and personal life. So we lived in some apartments and then played scrims out of this really nice duplex next to Venice Beach. It's sponsored by Rocket Mortgage. The funny thing is this duplex was actually super close to the Ember house that I lived in. So it kind of felt like, and that Ember house was eventually demolished and turned into an apartment complex. So like it just felt like everything was going full circle again. And anyways, I remember one of the plazas across the street from our apartment caught on fire. Yeah, so you can see that here, crazy fire. So we got some like super nice hotel rooms to stay in for a bit. Anyways, funny chef story from this team. I know. I'm a foodie. Like I always talk about the food on my teams. So we actually had a pretty good chef on this team, but she mainly specialized in Korean food. And sometimes if you were her favorite, she'd be like, oh, for you. And then she'd be like, oh, for you. And then she'd go under the table. She'd be like, secret menu, like blood sausage or something. And yeah, so she would have the secret menu under the table, but some of our Western players didn't really like that kind of food, so they ordered delivery. And I feel like that hurt her pride a bit. So then she started making American food, hoping that they would eat it. But I'm gonna be honest, like she was not good at all at cooking American food. Like it was really bad. So then now all of us were like kind of sussy about the food, and then she comes out with like what might be the worst burger I've had in my entire life. And I think after that we all started ordering delivery, and then she had to go. So very sad story. My memory is kind of wearing thin here. Like it's kind of weird because I feel like I remembered more about my older teams than my newer ones. So I don't remember why, but somehow we ended up with a team of Someday, Anda, and me in Academy in the split after, which is super stacked, obviously. And we ended up winning the Academy Championship. But to be fair, there were also lots of other LCS players in there at the time. Like, for example, Blabber, Spica, Palafox, Olace, like players like that caliber were also in Academy that year. I just remember when we did win. Oh, so this is us winning. Yeah. Yay. When we did win, we didn't get to take home the trophy. Yeah. They were just like, yep, pay up 10K to have a copy of the trophy. I was like, oh. So we didn't really have anything to commemorate the win. Though, if you're curious about the trophy, I will say it is pretty heavy, if you guys were wondering. It was my first time in a long time really getting first in anything. My teams have always placed second and third a decent amount, but never first. So I was happy that I was able to finally break that curse. I mean, for any esports, I believe winning is like the best thing you could do, and for vibes, and like losing is the worst thing. I think I remember like Minios was telling a story about how like they were winning, everyone was like yay, and then all the like the owner and the managers come out to celebrate, and they're like you're the best, like pats on the back, and then like when you lose, they're just like not even looking or talking at you. Like it's very much like that. It's very much like that. So this upcoming off season, 100T picked up Papa Smithy as a GM. I was informed pretty early on into the offseason that they finished their scouting and they decided they want me as a starter for the upcoming LCS split. At that time, my stocks were pretty high, so I would have had options, but I was happy with 100T management and how supportive they were of the players and the esports side of things. And the brand was one of the best in LCS at the time. You know, good merch, you know, tricolor hoodie, peak merch, you know, good content. So I agreed to play under the condition that I would be able to play a split as an LCS starter from start to finish for the first time. So I think this is actually a good time to talk about contracts, not the player, like actual contracts. So at the beginning of my career, players were heavily favored in contract negotiations because the teams needed the players to succeed, you know. The exceptions to this rule were teams with strong brands like TSM, who most players would take a pay cut to play for since the sacrifice was worth it for your brand. LCS teams needed strong players, otherwise they would get demoted. And Challenger Series teams needed strong players to try to promote. But after franchising, players lost a decent amount of negotiation power since teams had their spots secured. They didn't really feel the need to always put forth a good roster. So if you pushed too hard in contract negotiations, they would just pick up someone else, even if it meant that their roster would be worse. Some orgs still negotiated contracts in good faith regardless of this. 100T was one of them. But others were notorious for being very predatory with their contracts and especially exploitative, I don't know the word, of newer players. Some still in the league, and some are out now. Yeah, so anyways, I got a really nice termination clause, which came in handy later. I remember teams would always try to make you sign long contracts, like first year you get paid nothing, and second year you get paid normal, and third year you get paid a good salary, because they always know it's never going to last that long. Like they're always going to only have to pay the first year and then offload your contract to someone else who will then make you redo the terms, or they won't take you, and then give you another 3-year contract with the same thing. Like that was just like the meta for a bit. Like I was just like 3-year contract, 3-year contract, 3-year contract. So anyways, the roster itself was Someday Top, who I've now played with now on both Dignitas and 100 Academy, and we did well together both times. So I felt like we had good synergy. And then we had Medios, who I played with on P1 and also had a positive experience. And for AD, we had Cody, who was a close friend of mine from IMT, though we had never really played on a team with each other before. And for mid, we imported Ryoma. He was a very mechanically talented mid laner from OC, and our coach was Ziggs. So who I loved as well. So 3/5 of the roster that did well for them before. So honestly, I will say right off the bat, I don't think our team matched with each other stylistically. Like how each player wanted to play the game didn't really match with others at the beginning. However, we were really good at improving, or we were improving at a good rate as a team, with a lot of us making concessions to have a better, more cohesive team style. Even me and Cody, even though we were friends, we actually had very different views on how we wanted to play bot lane. And so we had to kind of build our synergy from scratch. For some ADs before that I played with, like the lane went a lot more naturally. Like we didn't really have to calm as much, but we definitely, like me and Cody, we have to talk about everything, which was fine. Eventually we actually got to the point where our lane stats were top 2 or 3 in the league, and we were pretty happy about that. So an interesting choice we made was bootcamping in EU. Normally teams do it in KR, and I liked it. I thought it was a breath of fresh air. It was my first time in EU. We went to Copenhagen and bootcamped out of the Astralis facility. Let me see if I have some pictures. Yeah, these are pictures from EU. I mean, I only have food pictures. I probably have other pictures too. Yeah, so we got to scrim against a lot of the LEC teams. Our records were good. It was like nothing crazy, We also did some team bonding stuff. And my opinion on team bonding is that it's not 100% necessary, but I think it can only be a good thing. I mean, I like to do it. I like to go out of my way to build relationships with my teammates outside of the game. To me, my team is like a second family, which I guess is kind of weird because we're also coworkers. But I think if you've been on a competitive team, you might understand what I mean. One of our coaches actually quit early from stress, and I think later down the line, I think he got twit-lungered. We moved into the new compound, which is pretty nice. Like, it's a spacious practice room. And we had a smart TV for reviews, comfy chairs, couches. Yeah, it was nice. Our split started off like pretty normal, and then one day, Cody tells our team like, I think everything's going to be locked down soon because of some virus, and that we should probably start taking precautions. And to be honest, at the time, I personally thought he was overreacting. I was like, no way. But then sure enough, within a couple of days, the world is panicking. Like, things started happening very quickly. Like, lockdown started. We instantly started working remote. LCS was moved remote. And then we had to do reviews in Discord. Everything was just really whack. All the grocery stores, empty shelves. Like, I mean, you guys have probably lived through it. I was kind of sad because it felt like I had my routine like set, and it was just thrown for a loop since like now the gyms are closed. I wasn't able to get as much sunlight, and I've always had some pretty bad insomnia issues. So if I wasn't able to keep my strict routine, I would often not be able to sleep, which was super bad, especially for nights before matches. We were still doing okay in our matches, but eventually we were hitting a wall in improvement, and we decided, oh, we have to get back together in the compound. And I pretty much drove everywhere to pick people up to go to the compound, so that was safe. And then getting back together in person was just so nice. It felt like we could have more productive reviews when people were able to talk face to face. And I guess you guys might be wondering why I was Nautilus every game. You know, you guys might be wondering that. So first of all, fun fact, for those of you guys who don't know, I invented and popularized Nautilus support back in Season 5. Before that, he was primarily jungle. Nothing crazy. I just thought, you know, this champ with CC on almost every spell would probably make sense in support. So I was playing it a lot in Challenger. And then I get a message from Lemonation saying that, oh, they thought it was pretty good. And C9 wanted to try it. And did I have any tips? And I was like, oh, of course. I gave him a bunch of tips. And surely enough, that weekend they played it and they won. And they shouted me out as the inspiration after the game. And, you know, college me was happy. Like, I was grinning ear to ear. I watched the match from my dorm room. And if you're curious about what it looked like back then, you can always check out my Nautilus montage on YouTube. I edited it myself in Windows Video Maker or Windows Movie Maker. And I'm always mind blown at how much it's played nowadays. Like, I guess this can kind of be my legacy, though most people don't know it. Anyway, so I guess while we were improving, we didn't want to change like too many variables in our draft. So our coach thought that Nautilus was a good champ to kind of like put us all on the same page. I mean, I'm always willing to sacrifice my matchup for the sake of the team. I've always done that. I remember Zazel saying something along the lines of like we were hooking ourselves to each victory or something like that. And I thought that was like a very funny way to describe it. We ended the regular split in third, which was pretty good. And then we lost to TSM 2-3 in the playoffs. Overall, we had a good split with upwards trajectory, so manager was pretty happy. They were like, okay, let's run it back for next split. Speaking of run it back, actually, I felt like this team had like the stupidest memes. Like, we would always be like, I remember there's some video where it was like, who would have thought? Like, because I believe like Milios and Cody were like, oh, how did we end up back here? So there was like, they did a video. It's like, who would have thought? And then that just became our meme. Like, we would just say that for everything. Like, I think our team like was so good at like overdoing memes, actually. Anyways, next split, I remember we had a really rough start. I personally was having a really bad string of games. And after 5 games of the season, a decision was made to terminate both me and Medios. And it definitely felt really out of the blue. Like, we did not expect it at all. Just one night, we got a call to go into the compound for a meeting. And then and then we were gone. And I truly thought that we could have bounced back, and I could have bounced back. And I wish I had the opportunity to be able to show that. But at the same time, you know, I was kind of getting used to that kind of treatment in esports. But in the moment, I remember feeling very strong emotions. I I rarely feel strong emotions. Like I can count on like one hand how many times I've cried in the last, like, my lifetime actually. And yeah, it was one time when I left P1 and the other time when I got terminated on 100T. And I remember crying for a very long time, like hours straight. I mean, I really put everything into my teams when I played for them. I grind like insane amounts of solo queue. I really like try to spend all my time with teammates and figure out like how we can get better, how I can get better. So when these kind of things happen, like I'm absolutely devastated. I will say one of the highlights of the split though was Edward Cleland, my GOAT of sports psychology. He's Mind Body Esports on Twitter. He sometimes tweets some good advice if you want to follow him. He has a crazy track record of success across multiple games. Some sports psychologists I've worked with in the past have just tried to transfer their skill set from their old job. You know, like they'll reference like swimming or baseball or whatever they used to do. And it just doesn't match one-to-one with esports. And I feel like Edward really opened my eyes to the importance of having the correct mindset and self-care, the importance of self-care for having a good performance. So that off season, I had a couple of academy offers. I really did not want to play in the academy anymore though. I felt like I had already spent a lot of my career now playing in both Challenger Series and academy. I did not feel like I had any more room to grow there. Playing academy in my mid-20s just didn't feel right. So instead I started pursuing coaching offers. I felt like I could be a really good coach because just from the amount of experience I've had playing at a high level, and I can tackle problems from both like a coach and a player perspective. And I was also fortunate enough to work with some of the best sports psychs in the industry. So a couple of my friends who were still players and also didn't have a team, we decided to form an amateur team under a new, this was one of the only orgs that were paying decently at the time. So I was co-coaching alongside Zig, an old teammate of mine. And our team was Viper, Anda, Fire, Value, and Big. So a good mix of old and new players. Pretty early on, our owner got banned from owning a team for trying to poach some player or something like that. So we decided to continue playing on with no org and no payment. And though the start was a bit rough and we almost disbanded at a couple points, we ended up pulling through and winning the whole Proving Grounds, which was like the combination of the T2 and T3 leagues. I think an important thing for me as a coach was making sure that my players were able to show their best self in our matches for the best chance to look good and get picked up in the future. It was something I wish I kind of had as a player. It's important to realize that you have a finite amount of focus and any extra burden you carry can also influence your individual gameplay. So I tried as much as I could as a coach to like kind of carry that burden for the players. So the expectation here was that, you know, after we won the Tier 2 league, you know, that all or at least most of our players would get picked up by a team after the split. But the reality was almost none of us did. I applied to many teams and got interviews. None of them fell through. Same as Zig. And our finals MVP Fire ended up not being able to find a team either, and ended up going back to college. And that's when I realized, you know, something is very wrong with the scene right now, and decided maybe it was time to move on. So my parents have always been very adamant that I get a college degree, and they value education highly. So I figured I'd try it one more time, you know. So last year I did reapply to UCLA. It was a short process, just had to fill out some forms, write a short essay about why I want to go back. I wrote a bit about my experiences in esports and how it helped me as a student. Got accepted pretty quickly, got to go back to school the next quarter. The counselor I had before was still there, and she remembered me. She was like, oh, you're the guy who dropped out to play video games. She's like, I always talk about you to my students. And that was really cool to hear, because UCLA actually opened an esports facility, or I don't know, like, I think facility. And I think going back to school as an adult was a lot different than as a kid. So I definitely was a lot better of a student. I came back, I got straight A's in classes that I'd failed multiple times before I dropped out. I was able to balance schoolwork while also making time to stream World's Champions Queue. I guess it was a bit weird to be a lot older than my peers, but still wasn't that hard to make friends. At the end of the day, I think I didn't feel the passion for what I was studying. Computer science, I had already been studying it for 2 years, and it was just like a bit complicated to change majors. So ultimately, I decided to stop after 2 quarters. Yes, the degree is important, and statistics do show that educated people with a college degree on average are more successful than those who are not, or who do not have one. So, however, I think I would only really go back if I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do required a degree. So yeah, I guess that leads to me to where I am right now, which is my streaming arc. I've always streamed throughout my career, even if I didn't have to. I thought it was so cool that I had any fans at all. I loved interacting with them whenever I could. Actually, I had a really cute fan. Do I not have the picture here? Oh, from here. I had this really cute fan, Elise. She's like, I don't even know how she became a fan of esports at such a young age, but like she would show up to all my matches, so cute, and she would like give me gifts as well, like handwritten messages, stuff like that. Yeah, very nice. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. I love interacting with my fans when I can, and to me, having the opportunity to make people's days just even a little bit better is very meaningful to me, and streaming allows me to continue to do that. I don't know what my future in content creation looks like, but I've never really been one to think that far ahead. Throughout this whole esports journey, I feel like I was able to experience so many things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't followed the traditional blueprint for life. Working in all these team environments has really, I felt like, accelerated my people-to-people interaction skills, and I was able to travel a lot around the world and just live out my dream of playing games for a living. Like overall, it's just been really great. Though figuring out life after my playing career has definitely been a challenge, for not just me, but also for a lot of the older players as well. Some of my old teammates have went on to become coaches and streamers, which is the most straightforward path that makes sense after pro. I've also heard some people have become realtor, physical trainer, doctor, even pilot. Some went to crypto, some became talent agents. Like, everyone's just trying to figure out their path. And yeah, I always get asked why I stopped playing and if I'd ever play again. And I think what most people don't understand is that most people don't usually leave pro. It kind of just happens. Like, you can't find a team one-off season and then for some reason, and then eventually you just don't want to sit around doing nothing, so you just find something else to do. And I probably would not play LCS again. At my peak, I truly thought I could be the best, and but sadly, as I get older, it's becoming less realistic, and there's less playing spots, there's less pay, it's just less hype in general. My main regrets are not playing at the world stage, and that my final games of LCS were not played in the arena but remote. I'm sure there's lots of stuff I forgot to talk about, but I hope this gives you at least a little bit more insight into who I am and why I'm here today. For those who made it to the very end of this video, thank you so much for listening to my story. Have a good one, guys. Bye bye.